You're listening to Season 2 of the Mies podcast. I'm your host, Josh Sharkey, the founder and CEO of Mies, a culinary operating system for food professionals. On the show, we're going to talk to high performers in the food business, everything from chefs to CEOs, technologists, writers, investors, and more, about how they innovate and operate and how they consistently execute at a high level, day after day. And I would really love it if you could drop us a 5-star review anywhere that you listen to your podcast. That could be Apple, that could be Spotify, could be Google. I'm not picky. Anywhere works, but I really appreciate the support. And as always, I hope you enjoy the show. With every stroke of the pencil, I'm giving you folks a glimpse into my experiences you could trace like a stencil. All right, ladies and gentlemen, this is a special episode, I would say, in that it's untraditional, in that the guests today have basically nothing to do with the restaurant industry or the hospitality industry, other than I would say that what they've built totally exemplifies great hospitality, at least in the digital realm. The guests today are Patrick Lightbody and Henry Shapiro, and they are the founders of this app that if you've been listening to the podcast or maybe other podcasts that I've been on, you've probably heard me talk a lot about this app that I use called Reclaim. And it has really changed the way that I work in a really positive way. It allows you to create all these habits within your calendar that get moved around. So you make sure no matter what, you always have the time for things like strategy or, exercise or all the things that are not booking a meeting on your specific calendar. And still allow people to book time on your calendar, and everything gets prioritized. I'm doing probably a terrible job of explaining how incredible this app is, but we dig really deep into it today. And I have to tell you, it is one of the best applications that I've ever used that has a significantly big impact on the way that I work and the way that I just generally run my life. We are going to talk a lot about what it's like to build product and how Patrick and Henry think about prioritizing what to build, the heuristics that they use to think about what features to build, how they synthesize the feedback of their customers, generally speaking, how they sort of think about the future of what they're building, but still stay very grounded. And of course, the history of how they got to where they got to with this product generally and with their careers. And it was, for me, an incredible learning experience of how folks outside of the restaurant space approach technology. And I learned a lot. I think you will too. And I know it's not specifically about food, or restaurants, or hospitality, but I think everybody can learn a lot about how to think about building great product, whatever type of product that you're building, how to have the right sort of first principles to make decisions, and how to continually iterate and get better. So thanks, Patrick and Henry, for taking the time to come on board. I definitely cold emailed them and asked them to come on. So I was really appreciative of that. And as always, I hope that you enjoy the show as much as I did. Man, I'm so freaking excited to have you guys here. I don't know if you know this, but I talk about you guys all the time. So this is kind of like a fanboy episode. I have to be really careful. One thing is, you're probably wondering, why am I on a hospitality, we are a tech company, but I'm a chef. I was a restaurant most of my life, and most of the folks that listen are in the restaurant business, and you're probably like, why am I on a restaurant podcast? But I'm just obsessed with your product. So I'm going to try to not have my tech hat on to just ask you guys a million questions about technical things, because I'm just enamored. But at least in 10 episodes, I have mentioned your product. I also just posted something about it on LinkedIn a while back, and I just love it. I don't tell you why I love it, and then we can get into you guys, because that's obviously what's most important. But I've been looking for this product forever, and I can see. I think I have a sense of the trajectory of what you're building. But I'm a big believer that it doesn't matter how big of a list of things you have to do, or even if you have an Asana board and it's organized really, really well of a backlog and in progress. There's only so many hours in a day. And this becomes even more and more apparent when you start having, obviously, if you're an entrepreneur, if you're a CEO, or if you have a job that's very busy, and then I have 2 kids, a wife, I got all that other stuff going on where time gets crunched. And it's it's irrelevant what your list looks like, unless it's correlated to how many hours you have in a day and when that's going to get plugged into, to your calendar. On top of that, I have an assistant that helps me with my calendar, because my calendar is I've always been maniacal about measuring the time I spend on each thing and looking back over time and seeing how much I spend on this versus that and what's driving energy or what's driving output, which is obviously a whole other thing that I don't have to worry about now. But I have these blocks of time that are just like, I know I need to just spend X amount of time on strategy. And I know I need to spend X amount of time on, just team shoutouts. Well, I'll just spend like 30 minutes where I just want to work on like things for my team or spend time on product ideation and things independent of like all the things I have to do. Just like I block those times. And before it was in my calendar. And then I would have to like delete that event or move it around. And it was a mess. And then you guys we'll talk about the product, but you solved that problem for me. And man, it's just like a game changer. So first of all, thank you. It's awesome. And I actually just started using the tasks as well, which is killer. I don't know why I didn't start using that earlier, but we'll get into that more. I just wanted to give a quick, like recap of like why you're on, because I just really love the product and I wanted to meet you guys. Patrick, I already met with you because of the refactoring, but we'll get into that. But why did you guys build this product?
Yeah, first of all, can I just say, if for any reason, the food business does not work out, you're always welcome. Just come and join our sales team or our marketing team. Cause, I was ready to buy this product they were describing. So I'm all in. I'm glad it's working for you. And you did a great job, describing kind of some of the intent that we were going for when we built this. Yeah. Henry, do you want to kind of tell a little more of our origin story and how we met and why the hell we did this thing?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, well, and yeah, echoing Patrick, thank you for all the kind words about the product. And it's always really cool to meet people who are using it in their daily lives and to hear about kind of the impact it's having. And that's ultimately what kind of gets us up in the morning and keeps us going, because startups are hard, as you know. Yeah, I mean, honestly, a big driver for us. I mean, there's really kind of two parts to our origin story. I'd say one was Patrick and I met when we were both product managers at a company called New Relic, which interestingly, our background has nothing to do with productivity tools or scheduling or calendars. Like, this was not our space, so to speak. This is not like our DNA, if you will.
Yeah.
We were actually very entrenched in the world of like DevOps and monitoring and observability. And I'll come back to that because I think that's actually part of why we ended up building something that we think is pretty unique in the market. But we kind of started with two main problems. I mean, one was, why the hell is it so hard for us as busy middle managers to get time for the stuff that we know is important every week? Like, why is it that every single week it feels like our calendar is like a debt we have to pay down every week so that we can do our real work, instead of a thing that really actually should be a pretty perfect encapsulation of what we're supposed to be working on? And that was kind of the personal problem or the individual problem, which I think you're kind of doing a good job of capturing. And then I'd say the broader issue that I think got us really excited about it as a business was thinking about the impact this has on teams and companies and organizations, where the calendar's like this totally ignored. Like, people have project management systems. As you said, they have their Trello boards, they've got their Asana boards, they've got all these databases of like stuff we're all supposed to go do. And then the calendar is actually where all this other stuff comes in. Like, some of those things find their way to the calendar, but for the most part, the calendar is kind of full of like my to-do list, my personal life, random sales calls, random distractions, random meetings. And we felt like, organizations just don't pay enough attention to this thing. It's been the same standard for like 30 years and no one questions it. No one really spends time thinking about it. No one really spends time trying to make it better. And our belief was that this didn't get better by just building a calendar app. This didn't get better by just like putting a new coat of paint on what was there. It really got better by the calendar sort of starting to get smarter about what it knows about you, because that's really the core problem, right? Is humans are making all these decisions themselves. They have to do not only the moving events around part, but the cognitive part of like, if I trade this thing off, what's the impact on all the other stuff I'm trying to get done? Like, how am I negotiating my time around my priorities? And so I think a big part of our kind of mission here was to really think about Reclaim as more of like an intelligent scheduling engine, or like almost like an operating system, as opposed to like, let's go build a productivity tool. And because we were people with this big background in instrumenting complex infrastructure systems and instrumenting applications, and like our whole orientation of the world was, how do you get visibility into these systems? How do you make them automated? How do you take all the toil out? Like, all the stuff we did for developers, we were like, we can do that for time. And I think that's part of why what we landed on was a little different than what you see in the market, because I think, not saying anything disparaging about anyone else out there, but I think a lot of people look at this problem and say, oh, what we really need is like a calendar with keyboard shortcuts. And it's like, yeah, that will solve a problem or a set of problems. There's definitely room for better workflows there. But that core issue of just like, why is it really hard for me to express the complexity of what I'm trying to get done and what's important to me and my team to this system that's supposed to determine where I spend my time? Like, why is that so hard? And we believe it all comes back to making the calendar smarter.
And I would just add briefly, just say, in addition, we founded a company called Reclaim.ai well before people were talking about GPT. Obviously, AI has been a broad topic for a while, but we felt very strongly that everything Henry said had to be underpinned with action, actual, assistance and automation. And that was why we named it Reclaim, which kind of speaks to a lot of what Henry was speaking to and what you were speaking to, reclaiming your time, being more intentional with your time, and AI together is really key to it all.
Yeah, no, I love that. It's funny because I don't even think of it as a calendar app. I think of it as just like a way for me to continually prioritize and reprioritize my time and take ownership of my time, because it's such a battle all the time. I don't know about for everyone, but obviously for a lot of us, where you have these calendar links, and that's another thing that you guys have. Where just like Calendly, like where you can get a calendar link, but here they're much smarter. They're more prohibitive, which is great. Meaning like you can determine when someone can book, not just like in terms of your availability of hours, but how far out and what types of things and different calendars. And for me, it really unlocked this ability for me to actually kind of like have a weight off my shoulders of, I don't have to worry about who's going to take up my calendar anymore. You know what I mean? I know if I have like things that like are table stakes part of my world, I have to have strategy time. I have to have family time. I have to have time to read. I have to, like, those things, maybe they get shuffled around, but they never get, removed. And people have to work around that and not the other way around. And my assistant doesn't have to work around it either, which is great. Yeah. So I love that. It also, like, you both are engineers or product people, and I don't know if you ever read Mythical Man Month, one of my favorite books, and I'm a chef, so it's like, why would I love that book? But it like blew my mind when you think about like the challenge of time, of like humans are terrible at estimating how much time something will take. And the surface of that is like, just take a week. You're like, I want to get all this stuff done this week. Well, guess what? You don't even have enough time to do all the things that you want to do this week.
Yeah.
And I think that's been a huge part of what you guys have been able to solve for, which is awesome. So we know like why you started it. And I realize now we've just kind of like been spouting off for a while, at least I have. And you talked about your origin, but maybe just for the audience, like just talk a little bit about like what Reclaim is, at least how you talk about it, and some of the features.
Sure. Yeah. Kind of continuing from Henry's origin story, a lot of our initial inspiration was very much of the features we built, and I'll go describe them kind of as we built them, was really anchored in real life kind of needs and jobs that had to be done that we were already doing in some way. I also say Henry and I are very pragmatic people. We call ourselves meat and potatoes kind of people, meat and potatoes entrepreneurs. We just like keep it real simple and just build and iterate. And as someone who's been using the product, you've probably watched it go through those iterations. The first thing we launched was maybe, I want to say it's like 1 month before the pandemic. It was like right as the pandemic was opening up, and we called it Life Work Calendar. It wasn't even Reclaim yet. And it was a tool to make sure that your work calendar appeared busy whenever you had a meeting on your personal calendar. It's just as simple as that. And I'm guessing a lot of your audience that resonates to them in some form, right? Everybody is maintaining at least two kind of lives and schedules in some form. They intermix together. And as the pandemic, really started kicking off, it obviously got even crazier. But even before the pandemic, this would be a problem for busy professionals. It'd be like, oh yeah, I said I'd meet you. I'd do that meeting with someone at work. And oh crap, I forgot. I actually have to take my kid to soccer practice at that exact moment. And so now I've got this little micro stress that is building up in my life around making choices of who am I going to disappoint, my kid, my spouse, or my business partner. So we just started with simple jobs that people needed to be done around their schedule to build trust and confidence and kind of this reliance that yeah, there is a technology solution that can help you manage your schedule and help you be a better version of yourself. So we started with one of our most popular features is called Calendar Sync, and that's the one I just described. Along the way, we discovered that it is massively popular with people who maintain like consulting practices or side gigs, because it turns out in addition to your personal calendar, sometimes there are people out in the world who have 3 or 4 or 5 separate work calendars. And life is even crazier for them because people in one organization think they're free when in fact they're actually busy because they have, double or triple bookings going on all over the place. So we synchronize that. That's one of our like most basic jobs in the like hierarchy of calendar needs. That's kind of the baseline. From there, we have a feature called Habits. And you alluded to some of that. And that's really about being intentional and making some time for goals that you want to achieve on a regular basis. And they can be sometimes very necessary habits, like I need to take a break in the middle of the day so that I can feed my body with some nourishment, aka have lunch. And they can be more kind of tactical in nature. I want to catch up on my inbox every morning and afternoon. Or they can be strategic in nature. I want to invest in recruiting or learning or exercise. And so they can be both work and personal. Now, the thing about habits, and that really kind of starts to like help people understand what Reclaim's doing that's unique here, is that they're not just like some time block that's fixed on your calendar. They're actually adapting to your changing schedule. And you can express them in the way you would normally express something. Like if someone asked you like, hey, when do you eat lunch every day? You wouldn't say, oh, I eat lunch Monday through Friday, 12 o'clock to 1 p.m. Right? That might be how it manifests on the calendar if you put a block on there. But typically what people would say is like, I often have a busy schedule. And if I can steal away half an hour on a busy day, sometime between 11 and 2, I'm pretty happy. If I can get an hour sometime between 11:30 and 1:30, that's even better. And they describe things in a more fluid way that's humane and representative of their busy life. And what we do with habits is we let the user express those things and tell us what matters to them, express those ranges of time, those priorities, and set those priorities relative to each other. And then Reclaim starts scheduling it. And what's beautiful about it is it adapts. So if someone invites you to a meeting at 12 o'clock, that lunch block might move to 11:30 or 1 o'clock, depending on what's most ideal for you. And what's even more beautiful is it actually kind of like a circuit breaker does for your electrical panel. It will naturally defend the time by marking it as busy on the calendar or marking it as free if you have lots of flexibility. And the benefit of that for busy professionals who are trying to meet with other people is availability is an important communication tool. On the calendar, how available you are to your coworkers or your customers impacts your job for a lot of people. And so what we do is we naturally choose whether to make those things free or busy based on the holistic schedule and the holistic priorities that our customers are interested in. So that, those two are like our kind of most popular features today. And they're really about like intentional time and defending of your time, but also leaning into the idea that meetings are okay, but so is some time for yourself. And you got to be able to defend it and adapt it. And then all of this is in the backdrop of a scheduling assistant that's reacting in real time. So when a meeting lands on your calendar, you don't wait a day or a week to see things adjust. You don't have to take action. Reclaim's working in the background. And so usually within a few seconds of accepting a meeting invite, you'll see things adapt.
Yeah. The way I learned about Reclaim originally is some people on my team, I didn't know what they were doing, but I started seeing all this like decompression time on like before and after meetings. They would have these things that just like decompress and at first like what's going on here? And then I was like, oh, that's nice that they're setting that for themselves. And I was like, that's a lot of work, but cool. So I could tell they were like putting time before and after meetings to just like decompress. And then my director of CS, Sarah, I asked her about it, and she's like, oh yeah, we use this thing called Reclaim. That's how I found out about it originally, because you also have these things called buffers, which is like, if you're traveling, you can set settings to say, hey, make sure that like someone can't book a meeting with me if I have a meeting away from my home office or away from where I'm working or living, because I obviously have to travel there. And so there's all these like buffers that I think are really helpful as well. Also, it's interesting, like so much of this product, and I think this is what I love about great product is it really touches the human nature and philosophically how we think, because I don't use decompression times because I want to optimize my schedule. So like I don't have before and after resting. I put time in my day in Reclaim. There's like a personal reflection for 5 minutes where I'll just stop and meditate or do something, but that's just some time in my day. It's not before and after meetings. And you can see how different people think about how they manage their time. And it is so much of it is like, how do you value the way you spend your time in a given day? And then I think that's what was cool about this product is that it allows you to take action on that and also see in a week, at the end of the week, hey, by the way, this is how you spent your time this week. This is how many people you met with, and this is how much decompression time or personal time. And last week, Sarah gave a shout out in the all hands because she was proud of how much decompression time she had or something like that. That's what I find really helpful. Look, there's a lot of other things we could talk about in the product, and I want to because I think there's some really interesting things that have been light bulbs for me about how I've been an Asana fanatic for a very long time. And now I just moved over to using Reclaim. It's a cleaner way for me to actually understand how much work I have. Well, let's talk about task lists for a second. And then I actually want to talk about creativity and just building in general, because I think that's, you guys obviously think about that a lot. Task lists, checklists in general have a lot of flaws for sure, right? You just write a whole bunch of things that you need to get done. And then there's no correlation to how much time it's going to take, which one is the most priority versus the least amount of priority, what is the context behind it. And so I moved over actually pretty recently to tasks, and I started putting, I moved over from Asana and put my due dates and about how much time I thought it would take, which it's the first time I've done that. I think because it asks you how much time will this take. And I was like, oh shit, I'm not going to be able to get that thing done. I'm flying to Chicago this weekend and I have to go to Michigan after that. And I have this thing I'm working on. And I was like, I actually don't have time in my calendar now to get that thing done that I need to get done. And so it was a real light bulb, because it was like, hey, you're not going to get this thing done. And I realized that would never have happened if I hadn't moved over, to task lists. So before we get into that, just what is your thought on checklists, task lists, things like that? And is there anything that you like about them, or are they out the window, no one should use them, and that's why you built what you built?
I mean, Henry, I'm certain you've got lots of thoughts here to add as well. I will just say, one, it's a deeply personal thing. Some people just literally work best with sticky notes around their monitor or rewriting their task list 10 times a week on different script pieces of paper. And just the act of writing it is calming and helps them kind of, center themselves. And so I would never judge or discourage anyone from using whatever system works best for them. Definitely the classic adage, what is it? Actually, now I can't remember the classic. It's planning is everything. The plan is nothing. Is that right? Or is it, I got it backwards.
Plans are useless.
Plans are useless. Planning is everything. There you go. Yeah. And I will say, having at least being able to start to think about, the actual bounds of the time, to your point around I don't know, how many hours do I need to write that post, or research that market or whatever it might be. Just the act of putting it down and then letting Reclaim try to fit it on the calendar is illuminating for a lot of people, because it's easy to say I've got these 10 things I want to do and they each take 10 hours. And you don't really appreciate that you just booked up your entire month. Mm-hmm. And so we do like that we're in the business of helping people understand that. But I wouldn't say that our mission is to replace all forms of checklists and tasks by any means.
It is a checklist. What's in there is a checklist. It's just behind the checklist is all of the magic that's happening. Right?
Yeah. And I think maybe even just returning to your original question about what is Reclaim, and you brought it up in the form of it's really dependent on what people's calendars look like. The reason we didn't go down the path of, there's products out there that are really dead set on the thing you should aim for is maximum focus time, minimum meetings, all your meetings should be batched together. And that's what we're going to try to optimize your calendar for. And that maybe makes sense for certain types of people, but not for everybody. Similarly, there's products that are really oriented towards tasks. It's all about replacing Todoist or replacing your task list. And, we've taken a strategy that's a lot more about, we want to be a system that makes sense for any type of calendar. If you're the kind of person who takes a ton of meetings and you can only squeeze in like a couple hours a week for focused work because your calendar is just bananas, like we want to help you get that time. And we want to sort of acknowledge that it's not that meetings are inherently bad and focus time is inherently good. You just have a different view of the world, right? Your priorities are just different than, say, a IC engineer who maybe has 2 meetings a week and has the luxury of like a pretty empty calendar. So with regard to tasks, I think the way I use them and the way that I think a lot of our more sort of manager-oriented folks use them is a thing graduates to a reclaim task when it is something that is going to get stolen from my calendar if I don't make time for it. So like I need 4 hours to go write my investor update. I know that if I don't get it on the calendar and start having Reclaim manage it for me, I'm going to do it at night and on the weekends. And I'd like to make sure I have time set aside for that. For the like, I need to respond to this thing, do this other thing, I use habits, or I'll still use checklists for certain things, because to me, I don't think of it in terms of I want to block out every single moment of my day. I think of it more in terms of what are the things that if I don't make time for them are inevitably going to get chipped away at. And so there's these universal concepts, and Patrick alluded to a lot of them, automation, flexibility, extensibility, being able to integrate with other sources, prioritization. There's these universal concepts we think are relevant for any person who has a calendar, but what you end up doing with those things, which features you end up using more or less, and which ones you kind of end up getting more value out of can be really dependent on what kind of schedule you have and what kind of role you have.
Yeah.
So I think we have some users, for example, with tasks who are their whole Asana list, their whole Todoist list, their whole ClickUp list, it just gets imported directly into Reclaim, and they use that as like their Bible. Like that's what they're really spending their whole week around. But when you talk to those folks and kind of look at schedules, you're like, oh yeah, like that makes sense. Like you're really into having everything plotted out, and there's not a lot of other things competing for your attention. It's really more about you having a plan for every day, which makes perfect sense. And then again, those managers are more like, I just love that I can squeeze like 6-ish hours a week to just get something done that isn't going to hold my meetings.
Yeah, it's the whole Paul Graham maker manager schedule.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
At the end, I wanted to do a little segment on some ideas.
Yeah.
So we'll get to that. But I want to talk a little about just like how you all think about building product, because as I've learned more about technology and building, product and UI and tech, my whole life has been as a chef, and mostly in the fine dining world of cooking. And even when I owned restaurants, I was still very culinary focused. And so I've always been kind of like, I like to create and build, and that's always manifested in food, and only, recently in the last few years in technology. And man, I love it. Like I love building product. And there's a very similar, like, I don't want to say like gratitude or that you get when you build something and you see the emotion that can be elicited from the thing that you build, and the feeling, and then of course the problems that you can solve is great as well. And then there's even these levels of like hospitality in technology that you can do where people are like, oh man, I don't have to worry about that. Wow, they thought of that too. And like there's this guy named Will Godara, I don't know if you guys know him. He has a great book called Unreasonable Hospitality, and he had the #1 restaurant in the world. And when you eat in his restaurant and similar restaurants, you might have experiences before. You walk in and like they already know everything that about you and what you've had before or what you like, and you sit down and you forgot your glasses and they bring you a pair. If you can't read, if it's raining, they give you an umbrella on the way out. Everything is thought of. And there's a similar sort of parallel with tech where you can create those experiences. And so I'm teeing that up because we'll step aside from just like the specifics of Reclaim for a minute and just talk about what makes great product in your guys' eyes. And then also, and this is still something I try to figure out, is like, what makes a great product manager in your eyes? And we're going to have to talk a little like, what is a product manager? Because it's foreign to the restaurant world. Because I think in technology, you have someone in product that's like coming up with these things and speccing what it should be and why. And then you have engineers that are implementing this thing. And sometimes they're getting into the more of the details. I'd love to like understand what maybe some one of the heuristics that you think about when you build product, and what turns a good product into a great product.
I think there's a lot of product management gospel, and I certainly read a lot of it when I was like learning how to be a product manager. And then I actually started working in product management roles and realized like there's actually all these things that no one talks about that make you successful in that role and make you successful at building product that are sort of unintuitive, I guess. And I feel like, I mean, in terms of product, it's like, I think the thing we talk about a lot is like details matter. I think it's really cool to have a strategy, and it's really cool to sort of talk about like leveling up, and people get obsessed with this of like, I want to be really high leverage and pull big levers and have big things happen. And they get really caught up in like I just want to make 5 big decisions a year, and that's all that really matters. And it's like, nah, like you got to like really dig into the details of every single little thing. And you brought it up around hospitality. It's like, that's the stuff that's delightful. And it's why in the really early days, we put intercom in our product and had live chat, and still have live chat to this day, because we think, it's a wonderful way, especially in a space where people are like trying something really different out for the first time, to stay close to folks and make them feel trusted. And we get very high marks on that experience. But also you will learn, I think, far more about what the hell, people are doing with your product and running into with your product by talking to them directly in a support queue than you will by looking at even like user data, or even watching like user interviews and user research and walkthroughs and stuff. Like those have value, but I think that live interaction with people is just, there's no substitute for it. Yeah, I think that's been a really big part of our journey. And it's part of why also I think we tend to be more incremental in the way that we work, because the idea that you're going to get something right on the first go around is just not, this is not how it works. And the beauty of software is you get to iterate on it like infinitely. You can ship something that's just barely scratching the surface of the problem and learn from that. And it can take you all sorts of interesting directions. And, if you look at what Habits was, Patrick, I don't think mentioned that the name of it, but it was called Lunchbody. Literally all it did was schedule lunch, and it was a hard-coded 11:30 to 2 p.m. If you look at that product, and if you go in Product Hunt and look for Lunchbody, you'll see it. I mean, the screenshots of that thing, you can see the kernel of the idea in there, but all of like the stuff that we've built around Habits as a platform now, it's been years of just chipping away and chipping away and chipping away at it. And so I think that to me is also what makes great product managers, is that they stay very hungry, and they kind of get obsessed with, the details. There's obviously danger in that too, but I think, you really try to be careful about all the little decisions that get made, because how much that impacts the experience. And also, it's like eating a whale, you want to do it one bite at a time. So yeah, we're not big on the like go stealth for 2 years and come out with the perfect product thing. I mean, which is an approach that's out there, and some people operate that way, but not as much us.
And that's part of what I love about technology. I never knew, it took me a long time to learn, is that notion of almost like the Kaizen sort of approach of like just constant iteration over time. And that doesn't happen so much in the culinary world, to be honest. Like you have to, because like you're going to eat a dish and you paid for it, and you might not ever come back, and it has to be at least pretty darn good. And so we tend to do R&D in the background for a very long time before we put something out, and then we can iterate on it. There's some threads I want to sort of pull on there, but I think one thing that I really love about building technology that I wanted to ask you about was like, I totally agree. And I love that you say like details matter, because they do. They matter just as much in food, especially when you only have like 3 things on the plate. Like they have to be, those 3 things need to be perfect, because you can't hide behind all these garnishes and things like that. And in technology, if you put out like whatever that thing is, the first version of it that you can iterate on, you have to know like what is the distilled down idea that is like at the root of the thing that you're trying to solve.
Yeah.
And just that. And that is so hard, to do. It's like, what is like this, like, the purest thing that I'm trying to achieve here that I can iterate on? And I'm curious, like, one, how you navigate that. And then just generally speaking, like, how do you prioritize what to build next?
Yeah. I mean, it's this funny thing where my version of the answer that Henry gave would be, good taste, innate curiosity, an ability to be comfortable going back and forth between tactical and strategic, and being okay with operating in the here and now, and also having an eye towards the faraway future. I think that's especially important in a, the entrepreneurial kind of product creation like we've been going through the last few years. But I think it applies even for mature products. To kind of back that up, I think it would help to explain when I said our first product was our calendar sync feature, it's actually not technically true. We built something that we threw away and never shipped. And it's actually much closer to where we are kind of now. Like, it took us 5 years to get back around to where we are now. When we first started Reclaim, we built a prototype where we asked users to type in their priorities in their own words and then go tag every calendar event with those priorities. And then we would make some recommendations and hopefully rearrange their schedule and kind of shock them, hold the mirror up and be like, hey, did you know that you're spending only 5% of your week on your number one priority? Don't you feel bad? And we built a rough prototype quickly. And what we discovered was people were really stressed out about that. And so when we talk about like good taste and curiosity, like, it was disappointing to find that answer out, to find out that like we were asking a question that was making people uncomfortable to the point that they weren't engaging in the early version of the product. Mm-hmm. And having a little humility to step back and say, okay, this is going to take longer than we thought. What can we do that is a first step on that long North Star direction that we want to go towards that will bring us there inevitably? And that's been, I'd say as a person who's hired a ton of product managers over the years, and as someone who's been with Henry in the trenches for the last 5 years, that has served us really well to always be keeping an eye on what that North Star looks like, but willing to step backwards a few steps and build something that puts us on that trajectory. And sometimes even acknowledging, and we have to say it out loud, oh, this is a slight detour from on that journey. But that's okay, because it is directionally going in that where we want to go, and it's fueling our business and it's opening us up to new opportunities. So yeah, it's hard. Like, how do you collect all those skills? There aren't a lot of people that have them all innately. And so then the next step is like, well, how do you develop those skills? And usually you find like some product managers and entrepreneurs and product designers, are naturally better at some than the other. I might be projecting a little too much, but I will say, I would agree with Henry's point that there is a natural disposition, especially in the tech world, where you can go read Twitter and read all these essays from highly influential people and kind of try to distill it down and be like, oh, cool, I just have to make some long-term bets and it all works out. So I will say we tend to find in the wild product managers who are a lot less kind of ready to get their hands really dirty and be okay with that tactical work. And so I would say anyone who's interested in tech and interested in building products in this model, try to fight that urge. And it's not to say the strategic mindset and, kind of begin with the end in mind is not a valuable skill, but it turns out there's a lot of people who have that. I guess, in some ways it just kind of comes back to your classic inspiration, perspiration, kind of thing. You gotta grind it out too.
This show is brought to you by, you guessed it, Meez. Meez helps thousands of restaurants and food service businesses all over the world build profitable menus and scale their business successfully. If you're looking to organize your recipe IP and train your team to put out consistent product every day in less time than ever before, then Meez is just for you. And you can transform all those old Google Docs and Word docs and PDFs and spreadsheets and Google Sheets into dynamic, actionable recipes in Meez in lightning speed. Plus, stop all that manual work of processing invoices, because Meez will digitize all your purchases automatically. And there's a built-in database of ingredient yields, prep yields, and unit of measure conversions for every ingredient, which means you're going to get laser-accurate food costs in a fraction of the time. Visit www.getmeez.com. That's GETMEEZ.com to learn more. And check out the show notes moving forward, because we're going to be adding promotions and discount codes so that all of you lovely and brilliant Meez podcast listeners get a sweet deal on Meez.
Yeah, and sometimes I think also, part of what, Patrick, you reminded me of is like, what is literally your vision is so often not the thing that actually helps you to prove the thesis of what you're trying to go build.
Yeah.
Like what Calendar Sync, aka Lifework Calendar, what it proved was people are open to the idea of a little bit of automation in their calendar. It was the first proof point of like, we can do a job that humans currently do manually that sucks, And it's a tiny little step towards them getting comfortable with a thing. We think at the time we called it Reclaim.ai. I mean, it was basically like a thing in the background that's kind of constantly watching and getting your back on just this little job that you're doing all the time. And we really badly at the beginning wanted to go straight to the jugular of like, okay, it's all about priorities and time. So let's build a thing that combines priorities and time.
Yeah.
And ultimately that didn't help us to really prove what we believed, which was, to really solve that problem, it's not just analytics, it's action. And we have to get people comfortable with this notion that they should trust us to manage their calendar for them. And that's an even bigger leap than getting comfortable with the idea that your priorities should be aligned to your time. Everyone sort of agrees with that in spirit, but getting something that starts doing it through software is kind of like, that's the whole bet. And I think that portion of it, I was kind of thinking about like what the equivalent role would be. My stepdad growing up was a GM at restaurants in New York for a long time. And I sort of like, for some reason, I've always thought of like the product manager role as like somewhat similar to that role, where it's like he worked with a whole bunch of different, managers and GMs over the years, like some of whom really exuded that sort of like, I don't need to be in the details. Like I'm here to like work with the partners and like, make sure the front of house is doing well, but I'm not going to like, deal with this, mess. And then there's like the guys that like are, there's no problem too small kind of thing. And I think that I think the best product managers we've worked with over the years have been above all like willing to kind of carry the water and be the folks that kind of, dig into the details and have an immense amount of like humility about what they're building.
I love that. But I think also what I'm hearing from you all, just when I hear you talk about it, is the first thing when I think about good product manager is Ben Horowitz, good product manager, bad product manager. A lot of that's very tactical, but I'll put the link in the show notes for anybody that cares. I hear a lot of like emotion in what you guys are talking about. I mean, even just like the idea that you had, you then saw how it made people feel and you had to change course.
Yeah.
And then it really resonates, honestly, a lot with me as well, because I basically like divested from my restaurants, sold them, and just said, I need to build this product because I want this thing and it doesn't exist and no one's building it and no one really cares. And I was like, I want to make sure people can be creative, or when I say people, like I want to make sure the culinary folks can be creative and profitable. How do I do that and build this sort of universal recipe medium? And the way to go about that on the surface level would just be like build a really cool recipe, like, platform that does all the features that you need for it to, cost and train all these things. And then, very quickly in the way we realized, actually, one, people are very particular about like their recipes. Two, getting the shift from moving from, a Google Sheet or a Word doc to software, even though Google Sheet is software, isn't just a technical barrier. It's an emotional barrier. I've been doing this my whole life.
It's a safe space that I've built up.
Yeah, and I created these formulas and I did all these things, and you like, don't touch that. I want it to be just like that. And we realized like, okay, we actually can't think about any like business features for years. All we're going to do for the next however long it takes, is adoption. How do we build technology that lets you take your stuff and put it in here, and it magically is even better than it was before, but still familiar. And that was not the plan originally, to build like a language model to parse recipes from all the disparate formats and make sure that they still have all the things plus more. And that was not what we had originally set out to do. And we had to spend an insane amount of time and money to build that, and still iterate on, every day. And I would have just started building all this like menu profitability things right away. It's really cool to hear you say that. But I also, I have to imagine it's a blow to the gut where you're like, oh man, this is a much harder problem than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. I think coming from monitoring, Patrick and I, when we first started working on this, thought like, this should be really easy. Like monitoring, there's no harder problem out there than developer automation and developer tooling. And that is a hard space for sure. But you mentioned kind of the emotional side of it. And I think that's something that's been pretty unique about this space is we didn't build a lot of products, I think, over the years that people had a deep, enduring kind of emotional attachment to. They used them as part of their work. They relied on them in their job. They liked them. It wasn't like they didn't have any sentiment. But this idea that you're building something that literally is going to control how people spend their time and help them to feel in control of their time or out of control of their time, and hold up a mirror to them in certain circumstances. I mean, we see it both in the sort of positive and negative sense, right? Like along the way, we've been really lucky to have, tens of thousands of people that, proactively reach out to us and tell us, what an impact we're making on their lives. We've also had people who've reached out to us over the years and said, oh my God, you completely annihilated my calendar. And, it was due to a bug or some issue. It's like the margin for error here is so low. And so that's really been an interesting kind of challenge in figuring out how to build something that also works for, and you kind of brought it up in the scope of like people who are used to doing it their own way, or have a system already, or have a way that they've kind of embraced it for a long time. Building something that can kind of accommodate different styles of working and different styles of kind of doing this job, I think is challenging. But it's part of why we didn't go down the road of saying, we have really strong opinions that it should be that the perfect way to manage your time is like Eisenhower matrix, or it's Pomodoros, or it's eat the frog. Like you can use Reclaim for all that stuff if you want to build your schedule that way. But we really didn't want to come in with this perspective that like this one person got it totally right for everybody. Nir Eyal totally nailed it. And therefore we're just going to take all of their ideas and push them in. I think we take inspiration from like hearing from our users and seeing ideas that we're like, oh, that's something that's kind of generally useful and could be reapplied to lots of different methodologies, but that isn't like embracing like one way of doing things,
Yeah, and I think a really great lesson for everyone, and this actually applies anywhere, it definitely applies in restaurants, is you can build a lot of, resilience of the things that go wrong when you do things the right way. Like your product is very thoughtful, it's very clear that like there's a lot of, every detail is thought of. And then of course you have like live chat, you have all these things. And it's the same in a restaurant where like shit's going to go wrong, right? Something's going to get burned, or somebody's going to get the wrong thing, and somebody's going to get something that they're allergic to. That happens, right? And usually it can cause a storm, like a shitstorm. But if you created that sort of trust, that level of trust, because like, okay, this place clearly is thoughtful, is clearly thinking about, is thinking about me, they care, and their food is awesome, or whatever the thing is really good, then okay, I can get over this, and I'm gonna, I'm gonna react differently. I remember when you guys moved to the new format. Actually, that's how I met you originally, because like you moved to the new format, and I was all set up with my calendar, and then everything changed, and I was like, oh my God. If it was a different app, I would have been like, what the F, But, we solved it quickly, and Patrick actually got on a call and helped fix it, at least help me understand. And then it sort of fixed itself. But that's so important, because all that stuff is going to go wrong. You're going to have another bug. You're going to release something else, and it's probably going to, screw something up. But when you build that trust.
One thing I would add to that is with technology, I'd say even more so. I mean, this applies with, physical buildings, architecture, almost any business. I'm sure in the restaurant industry as well, designing recipes and dishes that can have fallbacks. It's like, oh shit, we ran out of this ingredient. This fish isn't available today, so we need to switch to something else. You want to have those contingency plans. It matters a lot, for sure. I mean, what you're describing resonates a lot with me. And Henry, I don't know if you were thinking about when Josh was mentioning some of that. The first thing that came to my head is we made a very, very intentional choice, and it's so low level. But the ID patterns that we use for the events that we put on people's calendars, it happens to be that Google Calendar lets you either say, Google, you make an ID randomly for me, or Google, I will supply you with an ID. And I know this sounds really low tech for your listeners, but one of the things we did is we chose a pattern that basically is our fingerprint on those events. And it gave us so much confidence in doing the right thing for them, because it meant that we knew every single thing that was on the calendar that we created and that we didn't create. And we could put into the code logic that would say, never ever touch a meeting that we aren't responsible for. Because like the cardinal sin of our product would be canceling a meeting with someone they care a lot about. And so it's this funny intersection of humane design and having this like emotional connection to the user, but also coming up with technical solutions that can underpin that and guarantee that promise. In the same way, you can have architecture that's beautiful, but might kill everyone if there's ever an earthquake. And so you need both, right? You need a beautiful architecture that also is resilient and designed to be functional and survive any sort of unexpected disaster. That's like the love of technology and entrepreneurialism, is that with software, you get to iterate your way through that and learn every day. With architecture, for example, you do not. And even in the restaurant industry, I'm sure, a bad weekend because you hadn't planned for that could be devastating to certain businesses.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't know how much you think about this, because it was definitely like a culture shock for me. We started releasing, in the kitchen, you create a dish, and I mean, you plan beforehand for quite, sometimes for a long time, sometimes for a year, sometimes for a month. And then you put it out and you're like, that's my food. This is I've created this thing for you, and this is the final thing, and here you go. And in tech, I find myself always on these conversations when I'm talking to someone, and usually they're like, oh man, I love that thing. And I'm like, in the back of my mind, I'm like, it's not even close to what I want it to be. There's so many more things I want to build.
Yeah.
I hate that feeling. So my question for you is, it sounds like that resonates with you, but are there things right now that you could think of? You're like, I know this needs to be in the app and it's just not there yet because we just haven't had time to build it. And it's like,
yeah, we could probably spend the next hour on this.
Pick a couple that are like, most. It's the worst feeling, by the way. I didn't know this because I don't come from this world. I'm like, every time I have a conversation and I'm like, yeah, but it needs this. And like, you shouldn't be needing to do that thing. And we're going to solve that.
Yeah. I'll let Henry rattle off his few favorite, but I will say that you're absolutely right. And I think a defining human characteristic that can help an entrepreneur in technology, I think any entrepreneur, but especially one in technology, is just kind of unbridled optimism and an ability to kind of stop and reflect and appreciate the progress you've made. Because I mean, I can tell you, like today's a stressful day for me. And we've had a number of, bugs and issues pop up. And you look at them and they hit right in the bullseye of like, oh, God, yeah, like we could have done better there. We need to do better there. Yes, that was a thing we cut. It was on the cutting room floor when we launched that feature. And now I'm regretting that decision, and it's so easy to fall into that. Because with software, you've got, 7 billion people that can potentially be using it. So you're getting feedback all the time. If you've had even a remote amount of success, it doesn't take very long before you have thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of users. And if you form that emotional relationship, they gladly tell you all their feelings. And so you can feel it. And if you're someone who cares, you feel it heavy in a very heavy way. What counterbalances that for us all the time is you just take a moment to step back. And Henry and I, as partners, have been, established a good ritual of doing this when things get tough, is you step back and say, wow, think about how much, look at all we did in the last year. Yeah. Like that is just so much more than we ever expected. And it's, there's a lot of these cliches, but they're cliches because they're real, like where, people are terrible at estimation and they often overestimate the things in the short term, but they often underestimate the things in the medium and long term that they can get done. And when you go and you take that medium to long term look back, and if you've been, hustling and working and grinding, you find that the list is huge.
Yeah.
And that really helps center things and remind you that it's not always going to be this way. At least for these things, they'll just be the next thing and the next thing. And technology is moving so fast that will always, our product will never be done. Literally, it will never be done. It is impossible for us to outpace the advancements of technology and the demands of our customers. But what needs to be done is always changing. And that's what drives us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the same is true of even like building organizations or building your team. And I think that that's another thing that I certainly think about a lot is, I mean, our team was less than half of the size that it is now a year ago. And you think about like all the great people we brought on board, all the great things that they've built, all the things that they've kind of iterated on, and then it shows up in the product. And every so often I'll find myself like in Google Drive and I'll like pull up some doc somewhere that was from like 2020 and it's got like designs and stuff that we had that we were really stoked on, and now you're like, oh my God, what a difference a few years makes on this kind of thing. And so I do think there's definitely a value in zooming out. And I think that also the other value, I think, of having really deep connections to your users, and this is something you don't get as much in really big organizations, and I think it's another wonderful thing about being at a startup, is you can trust when strangers tell you that they love what you're doing. You should trust it.
Yeah.
And even though you're in the inside and you're like, you have no idea how much I hate the thing that you're talking about, how much you love it. It's like, you really, like, you should internalize it as like, we have made some success. They're not saying it's perfect. It's not like they have no feedback, but what they're saying is like, it scratched an itch for me. It really made a difference for me. And that like tells you you're moving in the right direction. And as far as like things that we want to have in the product, I mean, it's like, there's at the level of the details, there's probably literally hundreds or thousands of things that are like, all these little minute things. And that's, Patrick's referring to the anxiety. It's like when you're in support and you're in the queue and you're looking at the ticket list and you're looking at the bugs, you're just like, it like suddenly starts swelling up. You're like, oh my God, it's not just these 2 medium-sized objectives in the next few months. Like we have to fix like hundreds of these things that have been sitting dormant for weeks or months, and we haven't made any, we need to really address this thing, and your head can really spin around it. But I think just generally, it's like, to the point of Patrick, saying like our product will never be done. You're never going to fix every bug. You're never going to address every single issue in the product. And so we try to focus our energies on what would be the best things, the best kind of medium-sized things we could deliver to customers in the next 3 to 6 months, like for our business, but also like what would make the biggest impact for people. I think of it at this stage in terms of like calendar real estate. We at this point can schedule almost every single thing that goes on your calendar. The one thing that we are still really obsessed with is this workflow that we hear about every single time we talk to customers, which is I need to get 6 busy people in a room this week.
Oh yeah, that's a pain.
I know if I look at their calendars, there's no actual free time. So it's not a scheduling link thing. And it's not really even it's kind of a prioritization thing, but it's like, it's going to require some iteration. Like we got to kind of go back and forth on some times. And there's got to be this like assistant in the middle that's kind of managing it. It's a complicated workflow. And the reason it's complicated is it's complicated for humans too. Like the way humans do this is it doesn't happen in the calendar. It happens over Slack and email, and that one for us, I mean, there's other big rocks that we're trying to move on all sorts of different parts of the product, but that issue is one that we think of as being tremendously underserved. And if it is served, it's usually in the scope of like external meetings, like meetings with people outside your company. But the inside the company pain is like, it sucks. I mean, that was like our Patrick and my entire life for a good long time when we were inside of New Relic. So that's the big one that we're kind of focused on right now. And in between, it's kind of like, be opportunistic. When you see an opportunity to make something better, when you're like, hey, I think we kind of talked about this thing as a group and we got a good decision that we can roll with. And I think in like 2 days, we can make some good progress on this little issue. Like, let's just do it. It's like, don't wedge yourself to your roadmap and your North Star and your big objectives. Like be opportunistic to find those moments to make the little details better, but you can't fix all of it and you can't address all of it. So you just have to kind of find the balance, I guess.
Yeah. Can I share a couple?
Yeah, please.
And I have to imagine, because this is how it works for me, like whenever I'm like on a call with a customer, because my CS team and sales team, obviously they're mostly talking with the customer. So when I'm talking with them, it's more often than not just like, we're just like, catching up or chatting. And they're like, well, what, I need this feature. And I'm like, me too. I know, like I want that thing. Like, can you please add that to our thing so we can get another upvote on it? And there's very rarely a feature where someone's like asking for it. And you never say like, oh, I thought of that too, but probably have, which these you probably have. But some of the things that like I'm finding now, like one is the smaller ones is like a dynamic scheduling link. You have like you send a link to somebody, here's my calendar. But very often I'm like, okay, for this one, I actually want you to wait 3 weeks to be able to book. And for you, I want 6 weeks. And for this, because for different things. And I'll usually like send them my link and say, hey, by the way, the next 2 weeks are a little crazy, because I'll have some free time, but I know I don't want to.
We might have that solved for you already today. Go explore the personalized workflow when you're sharing or when you grab a link.
Okay.
And it's in the little ... menu, because we've been there. Same thing is like, sometimes it's either priority based or literally time based. You're like, this topic is not relevant for 2 weeks. Like I don't want to meet before 2 weeks from now. And so we built a feature that handles this personalized experience. And what it does is it takes your scheduling link that you're sharing someone and basically creates a derivative, a unique link you can share and embed into an email, and even select some times that you want to share if you want to like recommend and nudge someone to a specific time. And you can personalize it and override things like the priority, the time ranges that where it's eligible, like it shouldn't be available past this time or it shouldn't be available before this time. Whether it is maybe it's your normal link, but you have a very specific, location you want to meet at, and so you can override the locations.
Oh man.
Yeah, there's a lot of nice little features in there. That's actually one of our challenges is we've got this broad platform that we built over the last 5 years, and our customers rarely know about all of it. And so communicating that is one of those things we need to work on and do better with. But I think the personalized one will help you out. And pro tip, it also can natively integrate right into Gmail, both on the desktop and mobile. And so you can initiate that workflow right from your inbox.
Okay, cool. I use Superhuman.
Oh, yes. Yeah, no, Superhuman is, as soon as they have a platform we can build on, we're friendly with that team. And as soon as they have a platform we can build on, we will integrate better there. The other one that I would personally love is messages. I do a lot. I've almost given up on my inbox. I'm at that stage in my life, and I do a lot more texting with people. And so being able to write an iMessage kind of to go through those same workflows is one I'm very excited for. We don't do it yet today, though.
I like that. I mean, there's 100 more of that, but I won't share them here just to spare everybody. But I am curious, two things. One, just generally how you, like if you have any sort of methodologies around how you synthesize feedback. And then I don't know are you familiar with the 11-star experience exercise? The Brian Chesky sort of like what Airbnb is, like the 5-star experience is that your room is available and it's clean and everything that they said was there is there. And like it sort of goes up to the 11-star experiences. It's a private jet that picks you up and drops you off, and there's a parade waiting for you, and all your favorite foods are waiting for you there, and your favorite actor. And it's like, sort of like this exercise of what is the most insane, incredible vision of the thing that you build, because you can use that as a way to sort of come up with how could you accomplish some of that. I'm curious, just, and sort of take this however you want, but how you synthesize feedback, or just generally speaking, like the vision of this product. Obviously, there is no end state. You're continually iterating on it, but sort of a future vision of what you're doing.
Henry, do you want to take? I'll let you pick. You've got good thoughts on both of those. And on the feedback one, we should also make sure a link gets added, because Henry wrote a very nice blog post about the mechanics of how we track some of our feedback. Yeah. But there's more to it than that. Or you can share our North Star vision.
I'll start with the synthesis problem. I mean, I think we have a pretty great way of tracking, and to some extent, it's a little bit like what we were talking about earlier with regard to like things we want to see in the product. And I think actually this goes to the heart of being a product manager too. There are the kinds of features out there, and this is just my perspective. I don't know, Patrick, if you share this, but and actually I'm thinking about Roadmapper, the tool that Patrick built this tool when we were at New Relic, which was this thing that would take feature requests and you could add like ARR to it, and you could like sort of see like how many requests does this thing have and how much revenue is tied to it. And it was a cool little utility that like now we sort of do in the form of a linear to intercom integration. But my read on those systems is always like, when you think about the details, and I'm thinking like, I don't know, add a new option for tasks that allow them to auto reschedule less than 1 hour from now. I mean, we're talking like very granular. Like this is not like a roadmap vision-y thing. This is like, do this thing that like 50 people have requested. Those are the kinds of decisions that like, they kind of make sense as a thing you would consider based on volume. Like within reason, you'd say like, yeah, like if a bunch of people request this thing, the cost to build it is pretty minimal. It's not like a massive strategic undertaking. And so that's like a reasonable way to synthesize and kind of prioritize feedback is some combination of like instinct and volume. But
and I just want to chime in there, and I'll say we have a tremendously good system for tracing customer feedback back to these things. And yet I will tell you, we almost never go look at the sorted list and say like, oh, let's pick that top thing with the most votes.
Yeah.
I don't know if we've done that ever. And so it's very art and science. Often when we decide to go do a popular feature request, it's kind of like it's been washing over us through feedback. And we know
Yeah.
instinctively that it's got lots of votes. We don't have to consult it, but we finally, it's sort of like now feels like the right time to do that. And so, it's very art and science. The thing I just want to like underscore here is that connective, like, well, why bother linking all those feedbacks back up? Part of it is the relationship with our customers. We create lifelong fans when we come back to them a year later and we say, hey, remember that thing you asked about? It's live, and they are shocked when we do that. And it's one of Henry's favorite things to do is, close out a popular feature request. And then he gets to send out a notice to 300 people. And these become our ambassadors. And so, just want to like highlight, like, it's not just blind math. It's very much a smart blend. Sorry, Henry, I totally took over and hijacked your answer, but I got so excited.
And I think, the closing the loop part of it is huge. And I think it's in some ways, I guess what I'm really getting at is there are things that users will ask you to build, and they're not far off from what you might actually go build. It's like, that's a pretty reasonable feature request that's like pretty cut and dried. And like, I don't need to do a bunch of like job to be done persona analysis to figure out what we're doing here. And then there are all these things that you're like, I don't think people would ever tell us that we needed to go build priorities, for example. Like that was not a thing that people were saying. Like they were talking about all the symptoms. They were like, I don't like the way that tasks schedule. And I wish I could have like stack ranking for habits relative to one-on-ones. And like they're bringing up all these different flavors of the problem. And the way you kind of synthesize that is you say like, okay, we could go build all those little features and like make this super complicated system that has like a million different knobs and dials, like, or we could kind of just rethink how we do prioritization, which again was very aligned with kind of like our North Star from the beginning. And I think everything we do as a company, because we get also feedback, stuff like, I want you to link up with my fitness tracking app so that I can track, how many calories I burn during a workout. And it's like, it's a cool idea. I don't know that idea is going to get us any closer to what we ultimately want to be, which is like an intelligent platform for teams and organizations and enterprises to manage their most complex scheduling challenges, which is really ultimately like a step along the way to this much bigger vision around how do we make organizations better at managing and aligning their effort to their priorities? Like, how do we make it so that when someone wakes up in the morning, what they're doing in the next 5 minutes is aligned to what their team should be doing in the next few weeks, which is aligned to what their management layer thinks they should be doing in the next few months, which is aligned to what company leadership thinks you should be doing in the next few quarters and years. Like that's the world that companies want to live in. But where it is today is there's a bunch of discussion about what should happen in the next few quarters and years. And then there's all this fog about like how that translates to actual effort. And then there's a ton of people making like thousands of decisions every day about where they should spend their time. And so the fitness tracker app thing is like, that's cool. Like we don't like, probably we're never going to build that because A, we're pretty sure Apple will solve it before we do. And B, like it's not really at the core of, it's a reasonable request, but it's not like at the core of like, how do we solve that problem specifically for teams and companies, and individuals are sort of like the starting blocks for that kind of long-term vision.
Yeah. It took us a long time to really learn how we want to synthesize feedback. And I think, again, coming from the restaurant world, typically when people are giving you feedback, it's things that went wrong that you need to fix, or just like things that they want different in the restaurant. I mean, obviously they'll say nice things as well, but they're somewhat binary in terms of like how you respond to them. Like the service was slow. Okay, we gotta fix that, or we have to like, find a way around that. But I find that like people are either coming with ideas or problems, and 99.9% of the time it's an idea. And the challenge is how do you get to like the problem? Okay, your idea is that you want to integrate your workout app into Reclaim. Why do you want to do that? Well, because like I have to go somewhere else to look for that, and I look at all my like time here. Okay, well, why do you want to look at your time? Well, because like I know that like working out is important to me, and so I want to make sure that I'm not doing that as much as I'm doing this other thing. Okay, cool. So workout's important to you. Like what else is important? Like you get to like and it sounds like it's priorities, right? You can sort of distill it down, but people oftentimes don't necessarily know what they need. They just know what they right in front of them they want.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes even if the problem is one that we understand, this is the other part of being a product manager and entrepreneur is you have to say, that's cool. I understand the problem now. And we could totally go build a solution. Maybe it's your solution, maybe it's something else, but like it's literally not in our interest to go do it, right? And that's always a really hard challenge, especially when you're an early stage business where you're like, you're building your revenue base, you're building your customer base. You want to treat every single person as if they're the most important person. But you also have to start to get to a place where you're like, there are moments where you have to start to kind of like narrow the scope of what you're doing, because you could chase, I mean, if you go through our backlog in Linear, I mean, you could build probably 20 different companies out of the set of things that are in there. And it's not always completely obvious. Tasks are actually kind of a great example. Like tasks have the danger and have always kind of had the danger of drawing us really deeply into, I want you to become my Todoist replacement. Mm-hmm. And there's some degree of like, there are users in that cohort of people who want you to become Todoist that do actually represent your ideal customer. Like there are people who are like, yeah, and I'm a VP of product at this company and I, set up meetings using Reclaim with but I also really like your task feature and it's just missing these things. So it's like, you have those gray areas where you're like, it's not just one, you can't just say like, well, task is a trap and, it's never going to get us where we want to go. But you have to be really careful about how you invest in it and how you think about it as like a strategic pillar or a wedge if you don't think of it as like your core problem to be solved. So yeah, there's understanding the problem, and then there's also understanding like, is the problem even something that you should be in the business of solving, at least at this point in your journey? And that's the other art and science, I think, of this whole endeavor.
Yeah, and that's also why I think the most important thing in any business for anybody is you have to know exactly, you have to know why you're doing this thing. Why did you just start this business? What's the vision behind it? And then use that as the lens for all the decisions that you make. Because if you don't have that, or it's wishy-washy, then you can start to build all these things and do all these things and that's not relegated just to technology. It's in any business. Restaurants are no different. It's like, people can start asking for vegan things, or they can start asking for things that are just not why you started your thing. And maybe they are, maybe they're not. You have to know how to sort of have your decision matrix of how you do that. But yeah, like if you don't have a really, really clear sense of why you exist, then man, it is so hard to know when to say no and yes to those things.
Yeah. And time goes fast. And, a year goes by, 2 years go by, and you're like, what was I doing? You've got to protect that time. It is so important.
Yeah. Well, we could talk for a lot longer, but we probably all have things to do. And I'm just super grateful, one, for you guys taking the time to come on here and talk. And more importantly, just for the thing you're building. I think it's amazing, and it's helping me get my time back. And I think that thing that you started many years ago of priorities, that's like rolling back around. I think everybody should also just think about that. Like I have like these, at any given time, I only have 3 priorities. They call them like my MITs. My assistant sees them and like, they're like, here's the 3 things that matter over the next 2-3 months. And everything that isn't that should not be on my calendar, or needs to be sort of completely deprioritized as much as possible. And the more that I think everybody does, I think that the more you're going to accomplish, right? Because otherwise you're just going to be sort of swimming in many, many different directions. So I'm super grateful, and I'm excited to see what you all continue to build. And I'm excited to be a fly on the wall, just, seeing it happen. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Well, thank you for having us. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for tuning into the Mies podcast. The music from the show is a remix of the song Art Mirror by an old friend, hip-hop artist, Fresh Daily. For show notes and more, visit getmees.com/podcast. That's GETMEEZ.com/podcast. If you enjoyed the show, I'd love it if you can share it with fellow entrepreneurs and culinary pros, and give us a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcasts. Keep innovating, don't settle, make today a little bit better than yesterday, and remember, it's impossible for us to learn what we think we already know. See you next time.